What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking fall fishing. A lot of people have a tough time with that transition of late summer into fall, especially if you're up a little bit higher in the north and temps start dropping very quickly, or you get those erratic changes in temperature. All of a sudden, fish aren't where they're supposed to be, and you got to switch baits and tactics if you want to go get after them. Before I get started, if you haven't already, please subscribe and like this video. Helps us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the video. So a bait that is probably never going to let you down no matter what time of year it is still really shines in the fall, and that is going to be a spinnerbait. Now, especially if you're a little bit further south, this one I think does the best when the temps are still a little bit warmer and not quite frigid cold. Now, I have a very specific spinnerbait here. This comes in two versions, a double willow and a double Colorado. Now, the Colorado is what's really interesting to me, especially late in fall. Especially as we get into fall, I like to switch over to the double Colorado. This is going to slow down your presentation. It's going to keep you a little bit higher, and you really have to slow things down if you want that double Colorado blade to move through the water lower. That is really good. With a spinnerbait in the fall, I want to see things slow down, not so fast. This is going to help you out. Well, now another thing that's unique about the spinnerbait is you'll notice that you can't actually move this blade any further up. That's because this bead right here is actually welded in place. That means no matter how you cast this, the blades are always going to be where they're supposed to be, working in the way they're supposed to work. This has a very finely tuned, specific way of working. Another thing that's really unique is we got away from some of the softer style baits and we went to the old stainless steel. That yields a specific type of action on this arm here, meaning again, this is gonna always work the way that you want it to, and this is not gonna be so springy that you lose some fish when you try and set the hook. Another thing you'll notice is that there's this really interesting style of trailer. It's just nose hook in there. This is called the Mimic Tail, another new release from Fish Lab. Now, why do I like this? This is a really unobtrusive way of fishing a trailer. You can see it's got a tube here, and that's specifically to seat the plastic right at the bottom bend of the hook. This works really well for chatterbaits as well as spinnerbaits, really anything that needs a trailer, but I find that it works best for those two types of baits. This is a little bit counterintuitive. This is not how we typically want to see our baits. Intuitively, we think that we want the bait going all the way up the shank of the hook, and this one certainly is set up to do that if you want to do that, but really it's meant to work with the Mimic Tail. The nice thing about the Mimic Tail is it's, again, not going to ruin the intended presentation or action of the spinnerbait. Again, counterintuitive, but I highly recommend you try it. When you talk with the designer of this bait, Bill Cimentel, who's a legendary bait designer who really knows what he's doing, he intended it just for this specific purpose. I'm going to be using this a ton as we get into the fall. Number two is really similar, but it's really more for darker water or a faster moving presentation, and that is going to be a Chatterbait. You can't beat a Chatterbait when the temps start dropping. It's great pretty much all year round, but when the temps start dropping, it really does its best work. You can also see that I have a bigger blade here. So this is the Z-Man Big Blade. This one is one of the best chatterbaits out there when the water really starts cooling down, and this is also a bigger fish catching presentation. Something I need to remind you guys is when those water temps start dropping, you're going to get less bites, but you do have a better opportunity at the largest fish. So I tend to upsize when that water starts cooling down. That goes for my chatterbaits just like anything else. There's not really a bad trailer for a chatterbait, but that Mimic Tail I just showed you is a great option. Really, any straight tail bait is going to work best. Why do I say straight tail instead of a paddle tail? Paddle tails are great, but they really ruin the intended design and action of the chatterbait. Chatterbaits are supposed to shutter side to side, sort of like that, right? They're shuttering side to side. That paddle tail is doing the same thing, except in the rear. So there's no offset. It's really, they're both just shuttering back and forth. Yes, it works. Yes, this catches fish. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I feel like if you want the chatterbait to work the way that it was intended, a straight tail, like a fluke for example, is going to work a little bit better and give you a little more shutter presentation at the back of the bait. Let's stick with jig head type things, except we're going to go on the opposite spectrum. We're going to downsize with a finesse jig. How do you know you're dealing with a finesse jig? You're typically going to see the front half cut off here instead of folded back. That's because we're going to downsize that skirt a little bit. You're also going to notice that the weights are a lot lower, so you'll see everything below 3/8 of an ounce, maybe even below 1/4 ounce with a truly finesse presentation. I'm usually using a slim craw. I like to see this type of color, green pumpkin blue, or green pumpkin orange are two of my favorites for the fall. A lot of those reds and oranges I see tend to do really, really well. But a finesse jig with a craw on the back will absolutely crush it, especially in the river. Now, anytime you're talking about cold water, this bait's gonna be on the list, and that is a lipless. A lipless is gonna absolutely crush it when it's cold. There's really no wrong way to fish this bait, and that's what makes it so great. You can dive way down into the deep water if they're still down deep, and then you can yo-yo it off the bottom, and when you bring it up, it's gonna shudder side to side, and then it's gonna shimmy on the fall. That is going to be a killer presentation almost no matter how you fish it. But you can also fish super shallow. If you see fish shallow, just burn this thing back, and again, it's going to shudder like this all the way back to you. I also like to see people carry a couple different versions. This one from Arc, which came in a Monster Bass box recently, is a little bit louder. They also make silent. There's also the one knocker, and that is just a one ball bearing. I think that one came in a Monster Bass too, but it's a really loud single knock, a real thumper. You never know which one's gonna work. My favorite color is exactly this one, a red-orange craw, a really deep red or a bright orange. I feel like these really crush it in the cold waters. And if you find yourself getting hung up a bunch, just take this hook off. Take that front hook off and leave the rear treble on. You'll find that you get hung up a lot less because typically it's going to be running like this. Typically, when you're retrieving quickly, the tail is going to go up. That's going to keep the hook away from stuff that would normally hook you up, and then takes your risk away from the bait right there. Now this should come as a surprise to nobody, but my next bait is going to be the jerkbait. I like a suspending jerkbait. Jeff has just walked into the room. Welcome, sir. And now I'm talking about a suspending jerkbait. Is probably one of my favorite baits, and the first thing I'm going to reach for when the temps start to drop in the fall, and also for the spring. Honestly, you can make this exact same video in the spring, and it's probably going to look almost the same. What we're seeing here is a bluegill pattern. This is my #1 go-to. This will, again, the first thing at a time, bluegill suspending jerkbait. I like a 2 treble jerkbait, but a 3 treble jerkbait, especially when the fish are super finicky, could be the thing that saves the day. You're gonna find that the longer the pause, you're gonna get better results. And with the long pause, that's why I like a suspender. If you have a floating jerkbait, it's really nice that there's a lot of cover, but when that thing starts moving up, it can spook some fish off. So a suspending jerkbait means twitch, twitch, twitch. When you're pausing, the jerkbait's gonna stay right where you have it, and it's gonna be right in the strike zone, and you're not gonna spook those fish. And if they come and nip at it, that's why you want the 3 trebles. The next thing I'm gonna grab is something that's a little more, even less threatening. A bait fish presentation that's got more lighter colors, and this one, as you can see, is a little more clear. This is gonna be even smaller profile in the water, and again, if they're nipping at it, this is gonna be the one that's gonna get bit. Suspending jerkbait, #1 option. Now this last one might surprise you, and I'm gonna be going big baits. Now what I have here is a pike presentation. This is Mike the Pike from Weston. It's just the craziest looking one that I had, and it's one I had at hand, but any larger swim bait. Now that could be a big paddle tail, that could be one that's got a lip on it or a not lip on it, but what I'm talking about is a large presentation that you can work at a relatively slow speed and keep it somewhere in the water column. Think mag draft, for example. These are going to absolutely get annihilated by the biggest fish in the water. Again, you've got fish feeding up. They have to make decisions about how much energy they're gonna expend and how much return they're gonna get for that energy. A big bait, while yes, they're gonna have to work to go get it and they're gonna have to capture that fish and eat it, it also is like a big, gigantic steak for them floating through the water. Heck, maybe it's even 2 steaks. And technically, there's no reason you can't throw this. Jeff just handed it to me. This is a little mackerel tuna. I mean, why not? Fish aren't that smart, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's only 16 ounces. How many rods you got to throw a pound? Hopefully 1. Perfect, just like I did it. Those are the baits that I have found have done the best for me in the fall when I'm looking for those big bites. Or if you get desperate, those finesse presentations will get you a bite so you can get a little confidence and get back to fishing for those big bites. The fall is a great time to catch a gigantic fish. Hopefully these baits will help you. Let me know what your favorite baits are if I've missed some. Again, there's no wrong answers. I just want to know what has worked for you. This has worked for me. I hope it helps you out. Have a good one, guys. We'll see you on the next video.